It was a typical Wednesday evening, and I was browsing through OfferUp, looking for some good deals on vintage chairs. I had just moved into a new apartment and was eager to decorate it with unique and stylish pieces. Each piece in my house would have a cool and unique story. That was my idea of expressing myself in my apartment. I did not like the commercial, trendy stuff that everybody had. I wanted to make it special for my guests and my feasting eyes as I lived my life. As I scrolled through the listings, I came across a strange and unique one that caught my attention. It was a listing for a vintage wooden chair that looked like it had seen better days. The photo was blurry and the description was vague, but something about it intrigued me. The price was ridiculously low, almost too good to be true. As long as the chair was in good physical condition, I could repair the cosmetics and make it really cool. I hesitated for a moment, but my curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to contact the seller. I messaged the seller and asked if the chair was still available. To my surprise, the seller, who went by the name The Collector 69420, told me that the chair was indeed still available and that he could meet me the next day to meet up and sell it. We arranged to meet at a local coffee shop the next day, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation. I had always loved the thrill of finding unique and interesting items on OfferUp, and this chair seemed like it would be the perfect addition to my new apartment. When I arrived at the coffee shop, I saw a man sitting at a table in the corner, surrounded by various items that looked like they had been plucked from an antique store. He was an older man, with thinning gray hair and a kind smile. He introduced himself as the Collector 69420 and motioned for me to sit down. As we began to talk, I couldn't help but notice he seemed a bit strange. He spoke in a strange, almost cryptic manner, and his eyes seemed to dart around the room as if he was looking for something, like in some paranoid state. I brushed it off as just my nerves getting the best of me, and tried to focus on the task at hand. We made the exchange, and I took the chair home with me. As I examined it more closely, I realized that it was even more worn and tattered than I had originally thought. The wood was warped and would need some work to fix. The surface needed a significant amount of sanding and a fresh coat of paint. There were spats of red paint that were really in the wood, but for some reason I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It had a certain charm and character that I found endearing. That night, I had a strange dream. In the dream, I was sitting in the chair, surrounded by the darkness. I couldn't see anything. Suddenly, I realized I had a blindfold on. The blindfold was taken off of my face, and a man with a hammer struck me in the head. I suddenly woke up and felt my head. I was fine, but the dream felt extremely real. The next day, I examined the underside of the chair. Stapled to the bottom of the chair was a card that said Elite Hunting. That's a funny joke, like in the movie Hostel. I took the card off and put it to the side. I started fixing and warping the wood back to its original condition. I had made some good progress and wrapped up for the day. I found myself in the chair again in a dungeon-like setting. This time, there was a man in a butcher's getup. He had a knife. I was terrified as he came close to me. He started cutting me multiple times. I was really feeling the pain in my body as he applied the cuts. He finally applied the killer blow, and I woke up. My body was sore for some reason from the dream. Why am I feeling pain from a dream? What is really going on? The next day, I reluctantly started working on the chair. There was something going on with this chair, but I was committed to finishing what I started. I fixed the warping and started the sanding process. After I had spent a considerable amount of time, the chair was finally sanded. All that was left was the paint. I figured I would do that the next day. On the third night, I was in the chair again, bound by rope. I heard the sound of a chainsaw behind me starting up. Oh no. I tried to escape, but I couldn't get out of the ropes. the person behind me came to the front of me and put the spinning chainsaw blades right in front of my face. I squirmed in terror as the figure was getting excited at my agony. The chainsaw cut through my skull slowly. The blade reached my brain, and suddenly I woke up. That was it. I was done with this chair. I took it to the backyard and smashed it to pieces. I put it in my fire pit and I lit it on fire. I watched it burn until the last ember. I never bought another item from an online selling site again. Well, except Amazon. I believe the chair I bought was used in multiple killings, and the ghosts of the dead were still attached to the chair. When you buy something, first consider what the object was used for in its lifetime of ownership. You might find out that it was used for something terrible, and you don't want to suffer the same fate. It was late at night, and I was scrolling through the OfferUp app on my phone. I was on the hunt for a new piece of furniture to add to my home, and I stumbled upon a listing that caught my eye. The picture was blurry, but I could make out a silhouette of a beautiful wardrobe closet. The price was unbelievably low, so I messaged the seller to inquire about it. To my surprise, the seller responded almost immediately. She told me that the dresser had been in her family for generations and they were selling it because they were moving out of the country. She said that they needed to get rid of it quickly, which is why the price was so low. I was a little skeptical, but the seller seemed sincere, so I decided to arrange a meeting to take a look at the wardrobe closet in person. We agreed to meet at a gas station on the outskirts of town. Meeting at a random gas station is a little creepy, but I figured it was just a precaution on the seller's part. I don't know them, and they don't know me. I arrived at the gas station and parked my car. As I was getting out, I noticed a car parked a few spaces down from me. It was a van with tinted windows. I couldn't see inside, but I had a feeling it was the seller's car. I walked over to the car and knocked on the window. The window rolled down, and I was met with the face of a young woman. She looked nervous, but she smiled and asked if I was the one who had messaged her about the wardrobe closet. I confirmed that I was, and she told me to follow her to a nearby warehouse, so I obliged. I drove for a few minutes and eventually arrived at a run-down industrial area. The warehouse was at the end of a long gravel driveway, and it looked abandoned. The woman parked the car and got out, and I followed her inside. The warehouse was dark and musty, and there was no electricity. The only light came from a small flashlight that the woman was carrying. We walked through a maze of boxes and furniture until we finally reached the corner where the wardrobe closet was being stored. Now that I could see it for the first time, it was even more beautiful than I had imagined. It was an ornate, dark wood piece with intricate carvings and a huge mirror. The woman handed me a piece of paper with a bill of sale, and I handed her the cash. I was about to leave when she suddenly stopped me. "Wait," she said. "Since we're here, I have something else to show you." I didn't want to be rude. She seemed normal, so I agreed. She led me to the back of the warehouse, where there was a small room with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room was a pedestal with a glass case on top. Inside the case was a small doll that looked ancient. Its hair felt like it was made of real human hair, and its eyes were made out of glass. It was one of the creepiest things I had ever seen, but for some reason, it looked very interesting to me at that time. The woman told me that the doll had been in her family for generations, and that it was a valuable antique. She said she was willing to sell it to me for a very low price. I was hesitant, but something about the doll fascinated me. I asked how much she wanted for it, and she named a price that was almost too good to be true. However, I broke my trance the doll had on me and decided to get my wardrobe closet and leave. There was something about the doll that was inviting me to get it and to take it home, but I just couldn't do it. Weeks later, I was reading through the local newspaper. I saw that a family had been murdered, and the main suspect was the girl I bought the wardrobe closet from. There were 3 other pictures of suspects in the murders, 3 really big guys that the story said were her brothers. In the picture of the crime scene, you could see a body lying on the floor, and right next to the body was that doll. When you're doing online shopping, make sure you do your homework on whatever it is you're trying to buy. If there's an offer that pops up when you're going to get the first item, maybe there's a reason that they didn't advertise it. Emily had been scrolling through OfferUp looking for a new dresser for her bedroom. She had just moved into a new apartment and was determined to make it feel like home. She was looking for a classic, antique design. She liked the strong quality of older designs and wanted it to last longer so she didn't have to keep going to places like IKEA every few years to get something new and trendy. It just needed to look good and hold her clothes. After searching what felt like hours, Emily came across a listing that caught her eye. It was a beautiful antique dresser, and the price was unbeatable. She messaged the seller, and to her surprise, they responded very quickly. The seller, who went by the username Jester, seemed friendly enough. They agreed to meet at a nearby gas station that night to complete the transaction. Emily arrived at the gas station, feeling nervous. She had never met a stranger from the internet before, but Jester seemed like a normal person. If she wanted the dresser, she would have to let her guard down a little. She spotted the seller standing by a beat-up old van, and they exchanged greetings. Jester opened the back of the van to reveal the dresser, and it was even more beautiful in person. Emily couldn't believe her luck. She handed over the cash, and Jester helped her load the dresser into her car. The first few days of bringing the dresser home were uneventful. Emily spent hours organizing her clothes and admiring the dresser's intricate carvings. But as time went on, strange things started to happen. One night, Emily woke up to find her dresser drawers open and her clothes scattered across the floor. She would have been more concerned, but thought it was her demon cat that would consistently mess with her stuff. Her cat was a free spirit and probably saw the dresser as a new toy to enjoy. But the next night, the same thing happened, and the night after that. Emily started having vivid nightmares. In them, the seller, Jester, would appear and chase her through a dark labyrinth maze. The maze seemed to be made of a wood material, similar to the dresser. She would wake up, drenched in a sweat. The dream felt real, and she felt like her life was in danger in the dream. Obviously, you can't die in your dreams, she thought, but it felt so real at that time. In her paranoia, she got up and looked around the house. No one was there. Just her cute little cat. She would love and pet her cat, and then turn back in for the night. After multiple days of clothes being flung everywhere and night terrors, Emily decided to do some digging. She searched for Jester's username on social media, but came up empty. She even contacted OfferUp's customer service, but they couldn't provide any information on Jester's identity. The problem with a lot of sites like Craigslist and OfferUp is that you can open up one simply by providing an email that you just created, and poof, you're a seller. Emily was starting to hear strange noises in her house, creaks and cracks. Sometimes something that sounded like footsteps. Sometimes it sounded like something was moving across the table or kitchen counter. When she checked, though, nothing had moved at all. One evening, as Emily was getting ready for bed, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the dresser. She cautiously approached it, and to her horror, saw that the carvings on the front of the dresser had shifted around. Suddenly it looked completely different. That was it for Emily. She decided she had enough. Emily had finally determined that something was wrong with the dresser, and decided to do something about it. She took all of her clothes out. She dragged the dresser to the curb in the front of her house and called the trash company. The trash truck picked it up, and suddenly her nightmares had stopped. With her clothes now piled up on the floor, she took a trip to IKEA and bought a plywood dresser. She is much happier now, as her clothes stay in the drawer. She did not realize that anything was going to happen, but buying the dresser on OfferUp was bad news for her. She never used OfferUp again. Sometimes, items can seem like a great deal, but you don't know the history of the object. Anything can be cursed. There was a small town in the middle of nowhere that was known for its strange occurrences and haunted houses. Visitors would come from all over to visit the town and explore the various haunted destinations. Each destination had a specific story and atmosphere to give it a unique personality. There was one particular house that stood out as the creepiest of them all, though. It was an old, dilapidated mansion that had been abandoned for decades. Some said that the owner had gone mad and killed his family before disappearing without a trace. Others claimed that the house was cursed and anyone who entered it would meet their demise. The story of the house was definitely in question, as no one could pinpoint exactly what happened at the old house. How was it still standing after years of abandonment? The windows letting in the harsh environment all year was anyone's guess. As the windows were broken, letting in the harsh environment all year, it was anyone's guess. But it still stood tall, telling a story of what used to be elegance and luxury. It was a sight to see, that is, from the outside. As strange as it seems, the many visitors that came to the town would go to the old house and take pictures, but they would never go in the house. It was the weirdest thing. No matter how much they wanted to go, they didn't want to go in the house when the time came. There was some kind of odd groupthink that made a group standing outside the old house look at each other and decide collectively not to enter the front door. They would walk the perimeter. They would look in the windows and doors, but something compelled them to think twice before entering the house. It is probably that mysterious force that has saved many lives. Despite the rumors, a group of thrill-seeking teenagers decided to explore the house one night. They had all been hanging out together and taking some substance that didn't even have a street name yet. They were playing Ghost in the Graveyard at an actual graveyard. As the effects of the substance was going through their body, they were all laughing and having the time of their lives. After the full effects were felt, they all looked at each other almost at the same time. It was time to explore the old house once and for all. They all rode together to the house. There it was, the 3-story house that would have been considered a mansion back in its time. It stood tall and intimidating, but it was no match for the group. Together, they all walked right through the door. There was no external presence this time, though, no voice telling them to stop. They all entered the house. As they entered, they were greeted by the musty smell of decay and the creaking of old floorboards. There was total silence at first, but a windy howl could be heard that got progressively louder over time. As they started to walk through the house, every step made a loud, creaking sound. It felt like the floor could cave in at any minute. Because they were on something, the creaks were deafening. They could hear every creak every time they stepped. They could hear every plank of wood compress as their feet applied pressure. With this, their hearts began to beat heavier and heavier, which they also felt. However, they felt like their heart was physically moving their shirts with every beat. Their heartbeat felt like that heavy feeling you felt when standing next to a big speaker. Suddenly, their thoughts had sobered up. As they proceeded, they all looked at each other wondering if this was a good idea. They cautiously made their way through the dark, cramped corridors, each step echoing loudly in silence. Suddenly, they heard a loud noise behind them in the long hallway. They had gone from a little scared to absolutely terrified. No one wanted to turn and see what had just made the noise, but they had to. One of them got the courage. They turned and saw a ghostly figure levitated above the ground and coming right towards the group. The teenagers screamed and ran out of the hallway as fast as they possibly could, knocking down picture frames. 3 of the teenagers had escaped the house, with one more heading towards the door. Suddenly, a chair slid across the room and went right under the teenager's legs, knocking him on his back. As the teenager looked up in pain, he could see a beautiful chandelier that had been consumed with cobwebs over time. His view of the beautiful man-made spectacle was short-lived, as he saw it rushing towards his face. It collapsed on his head perfectly, causing fatal damage to his skull. The other guys saw it happen and ran for their lives. When the group was a safe distance away from the house, they called the police. When the cops arrived, they said it was an accident. They all knew better. It was an angry ghost that did not like anyone intruding on its property. Be careful taking substances, but especially if you're going to explore haunted places. The teenagers never got the warning that everybody else got, to stay away from the house, because their decision-making abilities were inhibited, blocking the only friendly voice that was there to protect people from entering the dangerous house. By the time they realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Happy exploring, everybody. A group of friends were driving through the deserted countryside in the middle of nowhere. The land was barren, with no buildings or cars. They were all talking about the road trip they were on, and all the fun they were having getting together once again. They were all friends from a long time ago, and they were doing a cross-country through Utah. There were many hiking trails and rock formations for visitors to explore, but where they currently were was nothing. Suddenly, they spotted a woman walking on the side of the road. She was dressed in ragged clothes and seemed lost and alone. She looked like she had been through a lot. The friends stopped the car after passing the woman by. They all looked at each other and thought of the situation. There was a woman in the middle of nowhere. Her clothes were tattered, and she looked scary, to be perfectly honest. However, they could not just leave her. They can't just let her walk in this desolate landscape by herself. She looked like she needed help. They all decided that they would have to take a chance on this unknown woman. They backed up the car on the empty road and pulled up beside the woman. They asked her if she needed a ride, and she gratefully accepted. Through the initial conversation, the woman seemed like a very thoughtful person, and definitely just in need of some assistance. Suddenly, they felt much better about the whole thing. The woman got in the car, and they took off. As they drove on, the woman told them her story of how she had been lost. She lost all the members of her party and had been wandering the woods and eventually found a road. She had been stranded for days with only a little water left. The group had just picked her up when she had lost all hope. They all carried themselves proudly as saviors. The girl got in the car and they took off. They had been driving for a while and finally started to see buildings in the distance. It was the first town for miles. There was no doubt in any of their minds that the woman was not going to make it. But as they approached the town, they were all looking out their windows at the old but populated town. They all looked back at the woman. She was no longer sitting in the back middle seat. She was just gone. They pulled into a gas station and called the police. They reported picking the woman up at mile marker 37 and gave a detailed description of what she looked like. The police combed the area and found a body. It was the girl that matched the description of their passenger. In reality, she didn't make it. It turns out that she had been taken to the woods by her husband. He led her deep in the woods and left her on purpose, taking her backpack when she was not looking. She looked for him but never found him. She did not know that he had betrayed her. She wandered around until she found the road. She tried to follow it until she saw a car or found civilization. Little did she know that she had also been poisoned. On the walk, she had started to feel sick from the poison her husband laced in her Mio-flavored water. She finally fell down to her knees and collapsed. Her lifeless body had been there for weeks, and no one driving could see it as it was covered up by desert plants. During the autopsy, the toxicology report showed the poison. The main suspect, her husband, was picked up by the police shortly after the girl was identified. Justice would be served, all because a group of friends decided to do the right thing and help someone out in need. Be careful out there on road trips. Maybe if you find someone that needs your help, you can bring justice to a restless spirit. It was another night of babysitting, and I was watching 3 kids for a family in a creepy old house. I got off the phone with Ruth, the mother, and she said she needed a babysitter because she and her husband would be going to meet with a consultant to finally decide on some much-needed repairs to the outside of their new old house. After that, they were going to go out and have a night together. Out of curiosity, I asked her how bad the house was and why. She explained that they had purchased the house in a short sale. She assured me that the house was not going to be dangerous, but when I saw it, I might be a little concerned. She said, "Please don't worry." I was starting not to like this deal, but didn't want to be rude to Ruth. I looked up the address on Google. It had a history. There was a murder there. Not recently, but it did happen about 17 years ago. The house had passed from family to family until it became the property of Ruth and Dan Schaefer. As I was reading the various stories about the house, it seemed that there were a lot of rumors that it was haunted. Looking at the house from the outside was very troubling for me. It looked terrible. The wood siding was rotting. The gutters were dislodged and hanging out from the house. The grass was high and unkempt. The driveway had large potholes. What a mess, I thought. I walked in, and it was actually pretty nice on the inside. I was very surprised. It seemed like they had already began doing some repairs to the house, starting from the inside. There was fresh drywall and paint on the walls, new carpet, and some demolition done in the kitchen. They had obviously stopped at the kitchen and were in the process of fixing it. Okay, so not perfect, but in way better condition than the outside of the house. The story was definitely adding up. I talked to Ruth as they were preparing to leave. They gave me their number and told me to call them if anything came up. I told them I would. I met all the kids, Joey, Annabelle, and Samuel. They were all really nice and sweet kids. I guess this would be fine. The kids and I hung out for a little bit, playing games and talking. I asked them how they liked the house. They said it was ugly on the outside, but the inside was a lot nicer than when they first moved in. Everything was fine, except for the noises they kept hearing when no one was there. I asked them about the noises. They told me that sometimes they would hear lights turn on and off upstairs. When they would go up to look, the lights would be off. They would investigate, and no one would be there. A few dishes had fallen on the floor in the kitchen as well. Sometimes the door would shut in different rooms. Things like that. I felt concerned, but had not seen anything myself, and I didn't want to either. As I settled the kids for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The stories the kids told me were making me have some anxiety. I was all alone now and looking around at everything that could make some sort of noise. I was really paranoid. However, nothing was happening. I started watching TV, waiting for the parents to come home. I was just counting down to 2 a.m., and it couldn't happen any sooner. As I tried to ignore the eerie feeling, something started to happen. I heard a strange noise coming from the attic. It sounded like a low growl, like a big dog. Did they have a dog? I did a lap through their downstairs to see if they in fact did have a dog that I just had not seen. However, there was no dog. I looked in the backyard. There was no dog. I still heard the growl though, with a louder tone now. I looked upstairs to try and isolate where the sound was coming from, but could find no resolution to the sound. As I was upstairs investigating, I heard a door open downstairs. It was the front door. It barely opened, but something opened it. The wind was howling outside and could have pushed it open if it wasn't latched properly. As I closed the door and made sure it was locked tight, I heard a dish break in the kitchen, out of my sight and around the corner. It broke directly in front of the sink. I entered the kitchen and saw the broken plate on the floor. I bent over to pick it up and threw it in the trash under the sink in front of me. I looked up and I swear I saw a shadowy figure pass by the reflection behind me in the window. I spun around and looked behind me, but nothing was there. Suddenly, I heard loud footsteps going up the stairs. I ran to the living room, looking at the stairs, and saw nothing. The footsteps continued up the stairs. It was going towards the children's room. I ran up the stairs and saw the kid's door swing open so violently that it broke the door off its hinges and collapsed. The kids screamed at the top of their lungs. I threw the door out of the way and tried to turn the lights on, with no luck. The kids were illuminated by the hallway light slightly, and I could see them. They were all pointing at the corner of the room, to the left side where I was standing. They said, "There's a man standing right there in the corner." I immediately grabbed the kids and ran out of the house. I got the kids into my car and called the parents. The parents said, "It's okay," and they would be there soon. When the parents arrived, They got the kids out of the car and gave them some hugs. They told them it was going to be okay, and they had just seen a ghost. It couldn't hurt them, so it wasn't a big deal. They told me the family would be moving out soon after the repairs were done. I was so shocked. Ruth pulled me away and talked me away from the kids. She said that the place was definitely haunted, and they had seen plenty of paranormal activity. They got the house for pennies on the dollar, though, and they were going to be set for life if they could fix it and sell it. They just couldn't figure out how to get the ghosts out yet. They apologized to me for not saying anything and gave me an extra $200. As I walked away from the house, I could see sweet Annabelle's teary eyes waving a sad goodbye to me as the front door was slowly closed by her mother. It was so sad. I understand that it's good to set your family up financially, but there's got to be a better way than this. I was heartbroken, but slowly returned to my car and drove away. I never returned to the house. I hope the kids were not scarred for life after that. Everyone wants the best for their family. Just make sure what you're doing does not have a negative consequence that will undermine your goals. It was a simple babysitting gig for some of my regulars, Sue and Bill. I just loved their kids and always had a great time watching them. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, and it was gated for that extra sense of security. I went there so often that I had their gate pin memorized. We all had started watching a movie and eating some chocolate popcorn, which is popcorn with a little bit of Hershey Kisses thrown in the bag when the kernels are still hot. It's just a silly thing to do, but my babysitter did it with me when I was young, and I tried it on them. They loved it. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until the phone rang. They had a landline phone. I had not seen one of those in a while, and did not know that people still had that. As I answered it, I heard heavy breathing on the other end. I said hello to get the mouth breather to say something. There was more breathing that was disturbing me the more I heard it. I demanded to know who it was. Finally, there was a voice on the other end that responded to me, but it did not say anything that I wanted to hear. The person on the other line said, "I'm watching you." Horrified, I quickly hung up the phone and tried to shake off the feel of unease. The kids were still watching a movie, but now I had a new secret that they did not know about. Should I tell them or not? I slowly moved around the downstairs of the house and closed all the shutters and curtains I could find. I made sure the front and back doors were both locked as well. I did not know if I should call the parents. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. I eventually decided I would call them though, and let them know someone was calling the house trying to scare us. As I went for the phone to call the parents, the phone rang again. This time the voice said, "Don't hang up on me again." I told them, okay, but I wanted to know what they wanted. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. The voice said, "Open the door." I told them no. They got very mad suddenly, but then tried to calm down. The voice said that he knew that I was the babysitter and had nothing to do with the situation, but demanded that I open the door and let him have the kids. They were the collateral that the dad had agreed to for a deal that went bad. I told the voice that that was not going to happen. As I was talking to the voice, one of the kids went towards the door to open it after they heard the knock. I screamed and ran towards the door as quickly as I could. One of the kids unlocked and opened the door, and it busted open, revealing two large men. One of the men saw me running and screaming towards the door and knocked me out, using my momentum to give me a harder hit. I woke up on the floor to the police filling the house and the parents freaking out. They saw that I was finally conscious and begged me for an answer about where their kids were. I had a huge black eye and a headache. Disoriented, I got up and sat on the couch. I looked at the parents and told them what happened. When I got to the part about the kids were collateral, the dad looked visibly shaken. He had realized what he had done. He had partnered up with a client for a business transaction. When the transaction went south, the client lost a lot of money, and the dad was determined to make it right. He promised his client he would fix it. He just wasn't fast enough. His kids were never found. The police have been searching for the kids for 2 years now, with absolutely no luck. They went to investigate the client, and they could not find him anywhere. His previous offices were abandoned, with no trace of his identity. I have been distraught about this situation. I can't imagine what happened to my favorite kids in the world. When you are a parent, don't be greedy. Your kids are the most important thing, not money. Don't lose yourself in a deal and end up losing everything. I was babysitting for a family with 4 young children, and everything seemed to be going fine until I noticed that one of the kids, Josie, was missing. We had just played a game of hide and seek, but had finished a while ago. I had not noticed the 4th child was missing until we were halfway through the Croods 2. I was shocked and a little scared. I told myself to calm down. Maybe Josie was just not in the living room. Maybe she went to the bathroom and I just didn't notice. There was no reason to panic yet. Let's do a little searching first. So I started looking. I looked in the kitchen with no luck. I looked in the closet bathroom and saw no child. The light was off too. I looked in the coat closet downstairs with no luck. And then I started to think, did I account for the kids after the game of hide and seek? I can't remember. Now I'm starting to panic. Now I was concerned that Josie had tried to find a really good hiding spot outside. With this new information, I jumped up and ran out the front door. I looked all over the yard and in the bushes. I started looking under the cars. I hate when kids hide under the cars. I always tell them not to do that. What if someone is in a hurry, just jumps in their car and speeds off to the store? They won't know anyone is under their car. No one is looking for that. Thank God I did not find Josie under any of the cars. I had gone about 50 feet in all directions from the house, looking under cars, and was satisfied that Josie was not hiding under any of them. I went back in the house and looked at the upstairs bedrooms. I don't know why I had missed the upstairs bedrooms initially. I guess I was just panicked. I did not find her. I searched the entire house and couldn't find her anywhere. There was only one more place to look. The backyard. I went out there as quickly as I could and looked in the trampoline, in the doghouse, and even under the house through an opening that I found. There was some evidence that someone had gone under there recently. Just as I was about to call the police, I heard a faint voice coming from under the crawl space. I finally found her. She had snuck out of the house and hid in the crawl space. The problem is that she fell asleep waiting to be caught, and I never found her. I breathed a sigh of relief and made sure to keep a closer eye on the kids for the rest of the night. If you're ever babysitting and playing hide and seek, make sure you find all the kids. You never know when they might be hiding forever.